It's Jonathan back with another video from my YouTube channel. This is going to be the first in a series of tutorials going over C Sharp, Microsoft's programming language. That comes with Microsoft's Visual Studio. You can go and you can download Visual Studio. They provide it for free, so you don't have to um, pay for it. It's actually a pretty sweet deal. Um, you go to Microsoft's website. You can do a quick Google search for Microsoft Visual C Sharp Express, and it takes you straight to it. Whatever other web search you might use, or search engine like Bing or Yahoo, that'll take you right here as well. So the big thing here is that you see Microsoft C Sharp 2010 Express, and it tells you it's free tools to create .NET applications. So you want to hit the Install Now button. Click on Install Now, and it's going to tell you, oh, the wait is over, get our best Visual C Sharp yet, and it's going to ask you to download the Visual Studio 2011, or actually just Visual Studio 11 Beta Premium. You want to skip it. You don't want to be writing anything in the betas for right now, and this is going to install so much more stuff than that you're not even going to need it. So hit download depending on the browser. My browser is Google Chrome. Downloads it down here in the bottom. So while I wait for it to download, you might want to know what is the difference between C Sharp, Visual Studio, and .NET. Real quick, we will click on, I'll close mine back here, and we'll click on this and we'll install it. Before I get into that, if it pops up with a security question and asks you to, do you want to allow this to install? You want to tell it, go ahead and just tell it yes, it'll be okay. So mine is preparing to install. So what is .NET? Microsoft.NET is a framework. It's a collection of a lot of source code that was pre-wrote for you. It's got a bunch of utilities to handle user interface design, data access, database connectivity, web application development, various mathematical algorithms and formulas already pre-built for you. Network communication, it does a whole lot. It's pre-built for you, so you can just tap straight in and start writing without having to worry about getting down to the very nitty-gritty of writing your own network code. Microsoft has done that for you, and you just use their code for your applications, and it's been tested. It's bug-free. You don't have to worry about spending a lot of time going through and debugging, trying to catch errors in your network code, and then have to do the same thing all over again when you actually go to debug your application. So it is it's really nice to use. It saves you a lot of time. Um, so we're going to go ahead and walk through our setup here. You can turn on yes or no if you want to send the information to Microsoft. I usually just hit no, but it does help them out. Yes, I've read the license agreement page through here. This next one's going to tell you where it's going to install. Because I have Microsoft Visual Studio 10 already installed, that's the path that it has to go into. As you can see here, installation location cannot be changed, because it needs to install Microsoft Visual C Sharp to wherever your Visual Studio folder is at. I believe if you are installing this for the first time, you would be able to change the install folder. But since I've already got Visual Studio installed for other products, I'm locked into this location, which isn't a big deal. Here it tells you your disk space requirements. You're going to need 765 megabytes to install, and 45 megabytes is what will be downloaded. On yours, these numbers will vary across computers, depending on what Windows updates you have, if you have .NET Framework part of it already installed, or if you've got Visual Studio already installed, or what have you. So your download requirements, you might have to download 700 megabytes. But since I have Visual Studio 10 already installed with a majority of these C Sharp components with it, my download size will be fairly small. So we will hit install. And here's going to tell you it's download progress, and it's going to install it. So this could take, depending on your install, it could take, and your internet speed, an hour, up to an hour or more. So be patient with it. So with this downloading, let's get back to our .NET. This is, I'm kind of lazy, so I got this pulled up here on Wikipedia. Um, .NET is a really nice language or framework. It's got a base class library, which means that, like here it tells you part of the framework. It's got file reading and writing, graphic rendering, XML document manipulation, and so on. .NET handles all the crunching for you. It's really nice. Language independence, meaning that you can write .NET, you can write an application in Visual Basic .NET, C Sharp .NET, C++.NET, and it will run. You can use code that you wrote in Visual Basic .NET, or you can use a DLL or an executable that you wrote in Visual Basic .NET with your C Sharp or C++ application, as long as they are using the .NET framework as well. So it really helps, uh, you know, tailor to the developers. You might have somebody in your team who wants to write like a video game. You might be writing a video game in C Sharp or even in C++. Um, but you have a guy who's building the tools, and he likes to build the tools in Visual Basic. And you can easily use the same game files that were wrote in C++ within your Visual Basic application, and you're not going to have too big of an issue because it all uses the same framework. It has something called a common type system, and the common type system specification defines all possible data types in programming, blah blah blah. The big thing here is if we come in here, the overall is that this gives a standard. This is all types inside of the .NET framework must adhere to this to the rules inside the common type system. There's a definition, and as long as they meet that definition, the requirements, then it will be considered as part of the common language infrastructure. It'll be considered legal. So you don't have to write your code to be um, as part of the common type system. Your code can be wrote however you want it to write. However, if you would like to maintain true compatibility across languages, it's a good idea to maintain to write your code to match this, and we'll get into this later. I mean, I don't want to confuse you guys too much. So basically, a very high level overview of .NET is that it's a collection of um, tools that you can use in your application to make developing easier. We'll get into, because technically it's a collection of classes, and we will get into what classes are, and namespaces, and stuff like that. So I just want to give a real high level overview, and that's what .NET is. .NET provides you with tools to make coding simpler and easier, faster. It takes care of a lot of things such as security, prevent vulnerabilities, um, administrative access. It requires administrative access with some things or whatever, prevents some, tries to prevent buffer overflows and whatnot. It's really, um, it's a really good framework to be using. I like it a lot. And majority of the applications being wrote today are all in .NET. So um, if you're on a Windows computer, chances are whatever application you're using was wrote in .NET. Vast majority of them. Um, what is C Sharp? C Sharp is the actual programming language. That is a programming language is what allows you to create a program. And because computers read things in zeros and ones, as depicted by this picture down here, computers read things by zeros and ones. So you can try and write. This is called machine code, and you can try and write the machine code, but good luck with that. Um, it's very time consuming, and trying to figure out bugs in this is not it's impossible. So what a programming language is a language that lets you as a human create the program in a human readable form. It's just like the human language. You have English, you have Japanese, you have Chinese, you have Spanish, you have German. Same thing with computer programming languages. There are a bunch of different languages available, and you just pick the one that best suits you. Some of them offer features that others don't, and sometimes you don't need all those features. Um, some of these, such as C Sharp, will have certain features that Visual Basic will not. Um, but it doesn't really matter. If you're going, we're going to be using C Sharp for these tutorials. Um, if you're using C Sharp and you compile it, even if it has extra features that Visual Basic does not have, it will still get uh, translated, converted into machine code, and the results will be the same, provided you're using .NET. So you could write something in C Sharp, or you could write something in Visual Basic, and by the time you are done converting it into machine code, it'll be the exact same application. There will be no difference. In order to get from the actual programming language into machine code that your computer understands and executes, it goes into something called a compiler. And a compiler is basically a translator. It takes what you wrote and it converts it or translates it into an intermediate language. And this is like a global language. This is something that .NET understands, and it does not matter what programming language you used. Um, the .NET framework will always understand this. So it is a job of the compiler. It's the job of the. It's almost like a translator. I mean, if you go to Germany and you have a translator there, you speak in English, and the translator will translate your English into German. That's essentially what's happening here. The job of the compiler is to translate C# language into intermediate language, common intermediate language, and that means that .NET can't understand this. .NET isn't really going to know what's going on in your C# file. The C# compiler knows that. All .NET cares is that you provide it with a common language, the same language. I don't care what programming language you use, as long as when it shows up to me, it is just a single language, common intermediate language. So it's like having English, Spanish, and then this is the global language that all languages must be translated into. Once it's translated into the common intermediate language, um, it is then turned into machine code. Easy enough. This is all done for you. You don't have to worry about doing any of this. All you do is you write the human readable code. Human readable code is pretty simple. So my installation is done. So I'm going to exit out of this and I'm going to close my browser. And I'm going to pop open Microsoft Visual Studio. Oh, well, my trial expired. I must have already had it installed. It's not a trial, it's a, you have to register or something. I'm not sure what. Let's take a look here. Have an upgraded service pack done. None will work correctly until. Okay, so I guess you're going to have to download and install Service Pack 1, which you can download here. So you can click on this button and it'll take you straight to the Microsoft website where you can download that. Maybe. Well, while that opens up, I'll just open up my Visual Studio. So you should have, for the most part, here we go. You can just scroll over here. Here's your Visual Studio 10 Service Pack 1. very small. You just download it, and it's probably going to work the same way that the installer worked, um, by downloading the files. So you'll probably have another download. We can close this. My Visual Studio is messed up too, so I guess I have no choice but to install this service pack. That's what I get for trying to install something while recording live. I do record these videos live, by the way, in the event that you didn't know, or see, reapply Microsoft, hit, yeah, send information this time. Next. So you can go to livestream.com/ScionWest, and it might say offline, but it'll eventually come around here, as you can see.
Long before Richard Branson created airlines and spaceships, he envisioned Virgin Mobile, a phone company that would make ordinary
Still, your video will resume in 20 seconds,
experiences
so we'll get back to that.
extraordinary. They all thought he was mad.
In the future, we'll be able to talk to each other with our
This is what happens
thumbs.
when you do things live.
It's just so simple, he thought. Why pay for minutes when it's unlimited data you really need? This is Richard Branson, and he's here to service you. Every last one of you. Unlimited data and messaging, just $35 a month.
To download the Express and show you how to get the free version. So, here you go. Here's the live stream. So I do broadcast it in HD quality as well. So you are probably zoom in too if you would like, or watch it full screen, either way. So that's available. Not too sure why this is there. It goes. It's installing. Not sure what that means. Wonder if it's because the path is too long, which I don't understand. This is going into my user's app data path, which is Microsoft's specified. Nope. So I don't know why it fails like that. Let's take a look here. You will probably be having the same issue. Or you might, I don't know. So let's go to users. Where's app data? Goes to local, temp, and Microsoft local. We're doing some troubleshooting today, so maybe if you guys had the same problem, we can fix it. Here's Microsoft Visual Studio. And what was it looking for? Let's copy this path. And it's looking for RIA services.msi. So if it's looking for RIA services, I don't know. Don't know why it's not wanting to work. I guess we cancel. You would think if it's downloading it that it would just automatically download what it needs. It's classic Microsoft not doing things half-baked. Well, it's nice to know that Microsoft's fix for the Visual Studio error doesn't even download downloads and fails. Can't beat that. Thank you, Microsoft. Still says rolling back. Well, it looks like it's downloading, so well, this could take a little bit. So, since this is going to take a little while, I would like to show you at least what C Sharp is. So I'm going to open up something else called MonoDevelop. You don't need to have this installed, and you don't need to worry about um, what exactly I'm so let's close out of this because I don't want to throw something huge on you. Just do an empty class file for now, and I'm going to let's do it this way. I'll come in here and add a new file. Empty. Okay. So this is pretty close to what a normal C Sharp file would look like in any of your applications. Zoom in a little bit here. So let's go line by line. Imagine, okay, so we open up a file explorer. Okay, let's take a look here at my computer. Here's my hard drives. I have two hard drives. If I go into one hard drive and say I go into games and then I go into emulators or Minecraft, okay, these are folders and each one of these contains a files, right? So I can go into mod, it's empty. I can go into Epith here and I got files. I can go into region, I got files, right? So each one of these folders contains files. This is how your entire computer is. I can go into my C Sharp folder here. Here's some files. Here's some files, right? .NET and C Sharp work the same way. if I want to, I can go into my development, go into C Sharp, go into line counter, and here's a couple files for line counter. Line counter.sln. If I go into the folder, I have program. Line counter, I can go into, um, let's find a better example. Let's go to R scripting here. And go into these folders. We have R scripting right here. So I have compileengine.cs, and I can go into late binding, and I have script factory, script object. You can go up, I can go into compilers, and I have different files in here. This works the same way. This is how you access, how you store your files virtually. I have a .NET has a folder, a virtual folder, um, called system, and inside of this virtual folder contains a bunch of tools and utilities that I want to access. They call these virtual folders namespaces, okay, which is what we have right here. You can see it, namespace. Because system is a folder that comes with .NET, or is a namespace that belongs to .NET. It came shipped with .NET. It has a whole bunch of things inside of it, and to see the the files inside of the system namespace, you can simply type system period. And here's a bunch of different items that reside within system. There's a bunch. Some of them, there's other folders. You can tell by the little icons. Like this would be a file, or a code file that you can use, access. These little brackets, those indicate a namespace. So you can have a namespace within a namespace, just like you do with your folders here. Alright, I have R scripting WP7. I can go into R scripting, I can go into late binding, I can go into .svn and props. Right, same concept right here. If I scroll down and I find myself another namespace like code DOM, you can double click it, hit the period button, and here's more code files that reside within the code DOM namespace. This is a way to keep things organized, because now you can have a code file. Let's back out of here. You can have a code file called console that is inside the system namespace, and then you can also have, but you can't have it in there twice. If you try to create another code file inside a system that was called console, you would get an error. And to demonstrate that, this namespace assembly C# we can change. This is whatever namespace we are going to put our code into. We want it to be inside of our own, so this way ours is segregated from the stuff that comes standard. It's just like on your computer. You don't go and dump all your stuff into Windows. You don't put programs and save data into your Windows folder. You create something else. Usually go in, or even in program files. You don't. They go inside of your user. You'll have um, your downloads, your favorites, your documents, your music. All that stuff is separated. That is not put inside of your Windows folder. And even furthermore, inside of here, like your documents, you'll have things broken down even more. Battlefield 3, BioWare, Development, Dragon Nest, Duke Nukem, whatever. So this is the same thing. We want to take our virtual folder, our virtual application, our source code, and we want to put it inside of our own virtual folder. It can be anything. We can call this my virtual folder, and see it says no matches, meaning that that virtual folder, that namespace does not exist anywhere else. Like I said, I'm just showing you what the code looks like and how it works, explaining it. Once Visual Studio is kind of finished, we'll be using that. So don't worry about downloading Mono and getting, this won't look quite the same inside of Visual Studio, but the code will. So we have a virtual folder, and it's good to get into the habit of calling it a namespace. So we're going to call this my namespace. Okay? This is my namespace. all of my source code here will be saved inside of there. Now if we want, we can put our code inside of the system namespace. I can simply go system, and now my code belongs inside of the default.net namespace virtual folder. So hopefully now you kind of get a good idea of what a namespace is. It's a way of keeping things organized. Now, just like with your Windows folder, so you have a folder with files, you have another folder with files, another folder, you can do the same thing. Instead of doing system slash my stuff slash something like you do in Windows, instead of the slashes, you can see this little line, little squiggly line, means that that'll fail. That's an error. This is not legal. You can't use this. Your program won't compile or translate. You can't use this. But if you replace the slashes with dots, same concept. Notice that squiggly line goes away. This is perfectly legal, and this is the same as saying system backslash my stuff backslash something. So all this code will be within the something virtual folder. Simple enough. So, but for now, we're going to go back and we are going to create our own namespace, and we're going to have all of our code be stored in there. Now, let's get rid of this. We don't need this. The next line down, you will also want to note that anytime you put something inside of your namespace, you have to wrap it inside of brackets. You put these brackets in here so the compiler, which translates the code into machine code, knows that whatever you place between these brackets is source code that needs to be compiled and turned into something. There's various different things that a compiler will turn your code into. In this example, it would turn our code into a class. A class is an object. Think of it, a very, very high level description is it's an object. It is something that it's it's like opening up your toolbox and pulling out a screwdriver. The toolbox is your container, which is what our namespace here is. It's a container, open and close brackets, so that it can contain this information between it. And then this is the actual object that is inside of that container. Okay. They call it a class, and a class is an object in code. To kind of give you I could give you a visual representation, but that should be pretty good. I think if you think of a class as an object, and we're gonna do it like this. We will call our namespace human profile folder. We'll call this a human profile namespace, and we will consider this class. It's an object, remember, so we can call this class human hand. It's an object. This is a part of the human profile, right? It's a human hand. This class works the same way that that the namespace works. It has an open and a closed bracket, meaning that it also will contain stuff. What the class will contain in between its brackets is the actual code that gets executed. This is the actual code that makes it do something, or allows something else to do something. As an example, and this is not legal code, I'm just going to write something in here like hand has small fingers. Okay. This, as you can see from the squiggly line, is not legal code, but it's a pseudo code, we call it. It's fake code, just make it simpler and get the point across. This does not do anything really. This just says, this tells us what the human hand has. It has small fingers. There's nothing that says make small fingers by doing this, or give it small fingers like this, or whatever. It just says it has it. its fingers have already been figured out. We know what kind they have. Its fingers, small fingers. So it doesn't really have code that has to be executed per se. However, we can create another class, public class human, um, or we can call it gloves. And now this glove needs to know, it might have a size. And you can say this glove size equals the size of the human hand's fingers. There. So this glove will get its information. This is actually executing code, right? It's not legal, it's not the proper language. Um, this is like speaking slang or something. It's not proper English, but it gets the point across. This glove size equals the size of the human hand fingers. Basically, this is executing code saying that I want my glove size to be this. So this is the code that gets executed, and this code never gets really executed. However, it gets accessed. So it's important to note that this code gets accessed. This code does something. It performs something. So we're going to delete this. So your code does not always have to be, it does not always get executed or something along those lines. It can be accessed, or it can perform something. Now, we're back to legal code. All our squiggly lines are gone. So that's what happens here in a class. In between these two brackets, you write the meat of your class. Whatever that class's purpose is, what it was designed to do or be used for, happens in between these two brackets. Now, this is an object, and we can have multiple objects. So you'll notice, remember I told you this is a namespace acts like a virtual folder, and a folder can hold multiple objects. So we can create public class, which I already did, maybe in case you missed it, human finger. Okay, so I have two classes, two objects that are inside of the same namespace. And you can do this, you can put in however many you want. We can put human arm, no squigglies. This is all perfectly legal code. However, remember I said you cannot place a class with the same name twice inside of the same namespace. So if I came down here at the very bottom and I went public class human hand, look, I have a squiggly. I can't do it because it already exists. However, I also told you that we can create multiple virtual folders. And I lost my mouse. There we go. We can create different virtual folders. So I can come down here at the very bottom and I can say namespace human profile dot body. Okay, and now I'm in a different namespace, so we can create the same class, human hand. You're going to receive no errors because it is no longer inside of human profile. It is inside of human profile dot body. So this cannot see this, and all of these objects inside of human profile cannot see this by default. So um, so we know that a namespace is a virtual folder, and a class is an object that you write code within that actually does the meat and potatoes of your application. Now, there's several different items that go into a class. You have fields, properties, and methods. So we're going to start out with a couple different types here. We're going to say we have fields, properties, and methods. Those are the three major things that you'll be using inside of your classes. So let's go over each one of them. As you can see here, our class is public, so that means that this class can be accessed from within any other class, from within any other application that is .NET. Fields, by nature, are not public. You can make them public, meaning that all any application that is built in .NET can access your field. And a field is something that stores data. However, it's a bad idea. The Microsoft's uh, I don't remember what it's called. It's their compliance um, their rules of how you should write your C# code or whatever. Fields are by default should be private, meaning only your class human hand can access the data this field is. Any data that is in here can only be accessed by your class, this one. So if I have another one down here, public class human arm should not be human arm cannot access a field. Technically it can if you write it that way, but it is discouraged that you don't. So let's say that this human hand has 5 fingers. You can set your field to say this human hand has 5 fingers. And only the human hand will know that. So what happens if your human arm needs to know how many fingers your hand has? We can use something called properties instead. A property is what is used to store public data. So if you want any class, any application to access this data, you would use a property. So to give you a couple of examples, there's several different types of data. You have numbers, you have letters, characters, right? Like P is a character, or words. Public is a word. In C# you call that, or in .NET you call that a string. In programming in general, for the most part, um, if it has more than one character, more than one letter, it's usually considered a string. A string of characters combined. But you do have numbers. You have other objects. You have um, various ways of testing if an item is true or false, differential comparisons and stuff like that. So to give you an example, we are going to use a string. Arm name equals 4 arm. I'm not too sure exactly how to spell that, which is kind of sad, but that's what Google is for. Not foreman, forearm. Okay, so I spelled it right. So we can go forearm. Okay, so I just created a field. Right here, remember we discussed that fields should be private and it holds data. Well, there is no public in front of it. I can make this public so it can be accessed from any place, but by removing public, it's become private by default. And it cannot be accessed by anything other than the human arm object. Because remember, it's within these brackets, so that means that this human arm object owns everything in between these brackets. So it owns this arm name field. Some people call these variables, but the technical term is a field. So you would tell it that this arm name contains data, and this data is a string of characters. Remember, the compiler translates this. This is human readable, meaning that you can read this and be able to understand for the most part, especially once you learn it, what it means. And it has to take this and convert it into machine code. So in order to do that, it needs to know what all this stuff means, what all it does. So it looks at this and it says, okay, I have a field called arm name, and it is holding a value. It's holding data. What kind of data is it? I don't know what kind of data this is. So we tell it. This is a string of characters, and it equals 4arm. Now it's important to note that anytime you use a string, you always wrap your string of characters in quotes, because otherwise the compiler is going to think that it's something like, oh, a string, a 4arm, or a string, arm name, 4, and then an arm, and then it's like, I don't know what 4 and I don't know what arm is, or I don't know what 4arm is. This is completely, what is this? If you wrap it in quotes, it's going to say, okay, everything in between these quotes belongs to arm name. It is responsible for knowing what to do with this. I don't care. And then the compiler also just pretty much, it starts out here and just checks just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. It hits this semicolon, and the semicolon tells it, hey, this is it. There's nothing else on this line. Go to the next line. Because if you want it, it's a terminator. It says, I am done with my sentence. This is a period inside of programming. It's telling it that I am creating a arm name field that contains this value, and it is a string of characters. Period. So we can do another one down here at the bottom. Say it is string. Call it arm owner equals Bob. So when the compiler comes down through here, it's going to go, okay, I'm creating a string. I'm going to call it arm name, and I'm going to give it the data for arm. And we'll just cancel that. And boy, this service package is kind of full of errors. So it creates this and it compiles it, and then it knows, okay, here's a semicolon, so this is period. Move on to the next statement. Next statement is the next line down, and sorry, I'm going to keep canceling that. And the next statement is the exact same thing but with different data and a different name. Okay, so these are fields. It's holding data for us to use. Next we have properties. Properties are a little bit different. Properties you create like this: public string arm length equals 3. Now we call this public, meaning it can be accessed from anywhere, but that does not make it a property. A property is an in-between. It's a cross between a field and a method, and I know I haven't discussed what methods are yet, but I'll get there. A property is a cross in between methods and fields. The reason is what happens if for some reason this arm length equals Bob. That tells us nothing, and we might have something in our code that's relying on this being a number, right? If you're creating a video game and you want your character to have an arm length of 3, and instead you get Bob, your character isn't going to be able to adjust the arm, and it might even crash your program because it's not going to know how to handle that. It's going to be like, how can I convert Bob into a number? And it crashes your program. That is where properties come in. Properties allow you to when your program goes to access arm length and get its data, before your program gets to access that data, arm length can do checks, can do whatever. It can execute code prior to providing the data to the program. So you do that like this. You delete this and you create two brackets. Anything, just like a class, anytime you have brackets like this, the code that goes in between these two brackets belong to this. Just like the code that goes in between this bracket and this bracket, all this code belongs to human arm. All the code that I write between these two brackets belong to arm length. And when a program wants to get access to it, say we want to get access to Bob, what are we wanting to do? We want to get access, right? So we're getting it. So you do the same thing here. You type in get, and you put in an open and a close bracket. And now whatever code we write in here gets executed when we get the value of arm length. And then if the program says, oh, I want to set the arm length to be 2, your user, your player is dragging a little slider and saying, I want to set it to 2, then it's a set. It works the same way. You set the length of the arm, or you get the length of the arm. And then in between these brackets, you can write the code. This code here will set it, make it, you could say, arm length is 2. And then under get, you can check and see, do various code. I'm not going to write the code because I'm kind of going a little more in depth than I wanted to, but you can write the code that says, if this arm length is not a number, then make it a number. Do it this way. Give it a default value, and then provide that default value to whatever is trying to get it. So you have complete and total control. And that is what a property is. A property allows you to control, manipulate, and validate your objects, your value, your data, prior to setting the value of the data or getting the value of the data and providing it to your application. You might sit and say, just like we did up here, arm owner is Bob. Well, what if we type arm owner equals 3? Well, that doesn't tell us anything. So when you do arm length equals 3, it comes into your set. And under your setter, they call these setters and getters. And under your setter, you would do a check. If the arm owner, if it's 3, then change it into some default name. Change it to player, change it to user, whatever you want. Change it to something default. So you can do checks. You can check when you equal something, when you set a value, or when you get a value. So that's the benefit of properties. Properties are usually encouraged to be public. And this is how you differentiate things. You use fields as privates, and this allows you to have information, data that only the human arm has access to. Things that nothing else needs, because there will be times when you're doing mathematical calculations or whatever, and you just need to store this data for right now. Maybe you want to know what the current swing speed of your arm is. Well, you might store that data as private because maybe not everything else needs to know what that is, or maybe you currently have the count of the number of hairs on the arm. Nothing else is going to need the number of hairs on the arm. Only the human arm needs it, so that it can calculate the movement of the hair, blah blah blah. So you make that private because this is all it needs it. And if you open it up as a public property so that other applications have it, or other classes have it, or have access to it, then that means that you are opening up the human arm to being edited outside of itself, which is why it's important to have your setters and your getters so you can make sure and validate what data is being provided. Because if human hand is accessing the arm length and changing it to whatever value it needs it to be, whatever data it wants, the human arm has no way of making sure that it's not going to be bad data that will crash your application. But if you have a setter in here, you can make sure yourself. You can do the checks and make sure that the human arm is not going to crash because a human hand sent it bad data. So, when you're doing things that are going to be public for other classes to access, you do them as properties. If you're going to be storing data that only that class needs to access, you can do it as a private field. So that is fields and properties. And my service pack 1 maintenance reapplication apparently did not succeed. So let's go to Windows Update here in case you guys had the same issues that I'm having. This is a little annoying. Oh yeah, use your start menu. Thanks, Microsoft. Setup failed. Let's try opening Visual Studio again, seeing what happens. And it opened. So I don't know what happened the last time. So anyway, here we have our public classes, we have our namespace, and you learned what a field and a property is. Now, in our next video, we will break it down item by item now that we have it actually installed and ready to go. We'll close out of this, and this is yours looks similar to this. Visual Studio Express should look pretty close to this. I don't think that the one that I installed is going to work. It's probably going to crash because that service pack did not. No, it appears to be loading. Good. So I'll start up the next video with Microsoft Visual C Sharp 2010 and Express opened up, and we'll get to writing some code. Thanks for watching. Sorry it was a little bit longer. I didn't plan for it to be an hour, but hopefully you kind of got something out of it and you got your Visual C Sharp 2010 Express installed. And you can join me for episode 2, where we will actually go in and we'll create an application together, and I'll explain how you use fields, how you use properties, and you'll actually get to see them in action. And I'll go in depth or go into those more in depth. The important thing is that you understand what a namespace is. It's a virtual folder. And that you understand that classes are virtual objects. Um, at a, for the most part, there's more to them, but we will get into those at a later date. It's not important right away while you're just getting started. You just need to know a very basic what those two items are, so you can interact and you can use them and code them over the next couple of videos in this series. So um, with that having been said, we're going to wrap up this one as a reminder. You can always check out my YouTube channel on it's Scion West is my name on YouTube. I also have a blog, Scion West Blogging, where currently I'm writing a game development series on what all it takes from start to finish to create a video game. From basically from taking an idea that you have and creating a plan, creating a schedule, getting a team, and turning it into something, um, turning it into a completed game. So, and then I do also have a YouTube channel right here, Cyan West Development and Gaming. And here I go over and show some of mine. Here's actually a video that I put together of some programming. This is more advanced stuff though for video games, showing um, a virtual user interface creator for your video games. But yeah, check out my channel, check out my blog, and then I also am on Twitter. So you can check me out. My username on Twitter is Scion West, and I tweet a lot about game development, programming, and just some random stuff, including a lot about technology. So check it out. Let me know what you think. And again, kind of sorry that this took so long, but The next ones will be much better and much shorter than this, I promise.